The realtor didn't know what she was walking into. She just knew it had been empty 11 years and the bank wanted it gone. Coming down soft, the porch sagging on the left side like it had given up waiting. I know this house. I grew up in this house. My folks sold her in 1994 when I was 26 and building my own life. I told myself I didn't care. Turns out I cared for 30 years. She's a 1911 farmhouse. Grandfather helped frame before I was. Wet plaster, mouse, old wood smoke soaked into the bones. Everyone at the bank said tear it down. Said the land was worth more clean. I paid $41,000 for her, and I'm putting somewhere around $95,000 back into her over about 7 months, and I'm going to save the one thing I remember best. Let me tell you how she got here. The Harlan family built her in 1911. Dairy people. There's a barn foundation out back, filled in now, but you can see the stone line if you know where to look. They farmed it 3 generations, same as my family did the trade 3 generations. My parents bought the house in 1960. The year before I was born, I learned to walk in that front room. My mother had a garden along the south wall where the light was good. When they sold in 94, a couple bought her, then another, then nobody. Last owners let a pipe freeze one winter and just walked. That's usually how it goes. Not a fire, not a flood, just one small thing nobody fixed, and then 100 small things nobody fixed. 11 years of that, and the town's ready to bury her, but she's got good bones. I could feel it standing in the hall. The floors were soft in spots, but the walls stood plumb, and that tells you the frame underneath is still doing its work. Somebody built this right the first time. My job I did was open her up and open it down in the front room, in the parlor, and I did most of it by hand because I wanted to see what I was pulling. You demo, careful on a house this old, you find things. A machine tears everything the same. A hand tells the difference between what's rotten and what's just old. I found the kitchen wing was the worst of it. That frozen pipe had run behind the wall for who knows how long before it burst, and the sill, that's the timber that sits on the foundation and carries the whole wall. The sill on the north side was gone, not damaged, gone. Punky, black, I put my thumb through it. About 14 feet of it needed replacing. And that's real money. Call it $3,800 with the new pressure-treated timber and the labor to jack it and swap it. You want to know how you find a bad sill without tearing the whole wall out? You take an awl, a little steel pick, and you walk the base of the wall, poking every few inches. Good wood stops the awl cold. Bad wood swallows it like cake. I probed that whole north run, and the awl went to the handle for 14 feet straight. That's when I knew. Nearly sat down. The joists up there were true. Old growth spruce, tight grain, 16 inches on center, and not one of them sagged more than a quarter inch across the span. 113 years and they held. You don't get lumber like that anymore. The tree that made those joists. You count the rings on the end grain, and they're packed so tight you need a glass to read them. Slow-grown wood in cold country, stronger than anything coming off a truck today. And the wiring, knob and tube from the 20s, then somebody spliced 1960s cloth Romex into it, then somebody else ran an extension cord through the wall like an animal. All of that comes out every foot. That's not is an evil on its own, and it was fine work for 1920, but you bury it in insulation and splice it 3 times, and it turns into a fuse waiting for a reason. Here's the thing about demo. Everybody reading part. The house tells you where she's hurt and where she's strong, and if you listen, she'll tell you what to keep. I filled 2 40-yard dumpsters, about 100, and I kept every board that was worth keeping in a pile under a tarp. Baseboards, casing, a stack of that wide floor plank. I'll use those again. Old wood matched to old wood is the only patch that ever really disappears. I labeled the trim as it came down too. Little pencil mark on the back, which room, which wall. Sounds fussy. But when you go to put a house back together 6 months later, past you is either a friend or a stranger. And I'd rather be a friend to myself. Now the structure. This is where the real work lives. The house had settled. She was low on the northeast corner by about 2.5 inches, which doesn't sound like much until you set a marble on the floor and watch it decide where it wants to go. The cause was that rotted sill and a stone foundation that had lost some of its mortar and let water in behind it. So I dug down along the north wall, exposed the foundation, and repointed the stone with a lime mortar. Not the modern gray stuff, lime, because lime breathes and moves with the old stone instead of cracking it. Portland cement is harder than the stone, so it doesn't give, and when it doesn't give, those stone cracks instead. That's the kind of thing that took me 20 years to really understand. The old-timers weren't primitive. Raking out the old joints is slow going. You dig the dead mortar back an inch, wet the stone so it doesn't steal the water out of your mix, and pack the fresh lime in tight with a little tuck pointer. I did about 40 feet of that wall over a week of mornings. Cold, wet work, but it's the work that keeps water out. Jacks, a quarter turn at a time. Over about 4 days, you go slow lifting an old house, you go fast, you crack plaster you meant to keep, you pop trim, you make new problems. Quarter turn, wait, listen, she came up level within about 3/8 of an inch, and I called that good because a 1911 farmhouse doesn't need to be a laser level, she needs to be sound, and I ran a string line and a water level while I lifted, checking the corner against a fixed point every few hours. The house tells you she's coming with little sounds, a creak here, a tick there. Those are joints seating back where they belong. The sound you don't want is a sharp crack. Hear that? You stop, you back off a quarter turn, you let her rest. Lifting a house is a conversation, not an argument. Now, I'll be straight with you. I made a mistake here. When I swapped that 14 feet of sill, I set the first new section before I'd fully cleared the old anchor bolts, and I had to pull it back out and start that piece over. Cost me most of a day and a few words I won't repeat. That one's on me. Lesson's the same one it always is. The old house was built in an order, and you've got to respect the order or she'll make you do it twice. The rest of the framing held up better than I had any right to expect. I sistered a couple of joists in the kitchen wing where the water got them, bolted new lumber right alongside the old with a row of half-inch through bolts every 16 inches, and I left the old ones in place because they still carry their share. New wood and old wood working together. That's the whole idea, really. You don't rip out what's strong just because it's old. You give it a partner. With her level and dry, I moved to the guts, the parts you never see and can't live without. I ran all new electrical, a 200-amp panel where there used to be a 60-amp fuse box that somebody had defeated. With a penny, I found the penny, I kept the penny, it's on my shelf. A penny behind a blown fuse means the fuse kept doing its job and somebody kept telling it to shut up. New wiring through every wall, grounded, done to code so the family that lives here next never has to think about it. That was around $9,000 with the panel and the fixtures roughed in. Fishing wire through an old balloon-framed house is its own trade. These walls run straight from the sill to the attic with no fire blocking, which is a hazard but a gift when you're pulling cable. Drop a chain from the attic, tie on and pull. I mapped every run on a sheet of plywood before I bought a foot of wire, so I wasn't guessing halfway up a wall in the dark. Plumbing came next. The old cast iron drain stack was cracked and the supply lines were that galvanized steel that chokes down to a pencil width of rust after 80 years. You cut a section and hold it to the light and the hole you can see through is smaller than a drinking straw. All of it out. New PEX for the supply, new PVC for the drains, and I moved the water heater up out of the crawl space where it never belonged, about $7,500. I set the drain lines first because water only runs downhill and you've got to earn your slope. Quarter inch of fall per foot, no more, no less. Too flat, it clogs. Too steep, the water outruns the solids and leaves them behind. Then the supply lines threaded around them. Do it in that order and you never fight yourself. And insulation, which in Vermont is not a luxury, it's survival. This house had newspaper in some of the walls, 1930s newspaper. And I read a little of it before I bagged it because how often do you get to read the day's news from 90 years ago while you're standing in the wall it was hiding in? Somebody stuffed it in there to slow the cold. It didn't, but it tried. I dense-packed cellulose in the walls, and dense-pack means exactly that. You blow it in under pressure until the wall's packed tight enough it can't settle and leave a cold gap at the top. Then spray foam at the sill and the rim joist because that's where a Vermont house loses her heat, right down low, where you can't feel the draft, but your fuel bill sure can. Roughly $6,000 for the whole envelope, and here's where the season started leaning on me. I'd wanted the house closed up and warm by mid-November. First hard freeze came the last week of October. I was working in a house with no heat, breath showing, fingers going stupid. By 3 in the afternoon, I got a temporary heater going, kerosene torpedo roaring in the front room, and I pushed the insulation ahead of everything else because you cannot hang finish work in a house that's freezing. The plaster won't cure, the wood won't sit still, and neither will your hands. Winter here doesn't ask what your schedule is. She just shows up early and stays late. Once she was sealed and warm, the house changed. You could feel her settle into being a house again instead of a patient. The air stops smelling like wet stone. That's when the good part starts. Floors first, under 3 layers of vinyl and a carpet somebody glued down in the 70s, I found the original, a wide plank pine, old growth pine. Boards 9 and 10 inches wide, the kind of thing they'd charge you a fortune for now if you could even get it. Most of it was sound. I pulled the ruined boards near the old leak and replaced them with the boards I'd saved under that tarp. Same age, same wood, so the patch disappears. I pulled 1,000 old cut nails out of those floors by hand before I could sand. Square nails, each one set by somebody's hammer in 1911. Then I sanded her down in stages, rough grit to fine, and I finished with a penetrating oil, not polyurethane because I wanted the wood to look like wood and not like it's under glass. Oil you can spot repair for the next 100 years. Poly you can't, it scratches, and then you're sanding the whole floor again. The kitchen I built new, but built it plain. Shaker doors I made in my own shop, painted a soft green because my mother's kitchen was green and I'm not too proud to admit that's why. I cut the rails and stiles from poplar, coped the joints tight, and hung every door on the bench so the reveals were even before it ever got near the wall. A soapstone counter because soapstone's what a farmhouse would have had if it could afford it, and it takes a hot pan and 100 years without complaining. Rub a little mineral oil into it and it goes deep charcoal like a wet river stone. The kitchen ran me about $14,000 all in, and most of that's the counter and the appliances. The cabinets were my time. I hung real fixtures, warm light, nothing that buzzes. Rewired the front room for a proper chandelier drop because a room that tall wants light coming from up high, not crawling along the floor. And then there's the piece. There's always one piece. This one I knew before I ever bought the house back. In the front room, there's a fireplace mantel my grandfather carved. He built it the year my parents moved in, 1961, out of cherry. And I remember running my hand along the edge of it as a boy, where he'd cut a little bead detail, a rounded lip, all the way around. Somebody had painted it. 6 coats of paint, brown, then cream, then a bad tan. And I spent 3 evenings with a heat gun and a dental pick getting down to that cherry. You keep the heat gun moving, low setting, because scorched cherry and you've traded one problem for a worse one. The paint bubbles and you lift it with a wide putty knife. Then the pick gets into the bead where the knife can't. Slow, careful. When the last of the paint came off and I saw his bead detail again clean, exactly where my hand remembered it, I had to stop for a minute. That's the honest truth. A carpenter's dead 30 years and his work's still here teaching me patience. I oiled it, didn't stain it. The cherry did the rest. It went dark and warm like cherry does, deeper every week. And it's the heart of the house now, same as it was when I was a kid. Let me walk you through her. Finished. From the road, the porch sits level now. New posts turned on the lathe to match the old ones. The clapboards painted the same white she wore in 1911. The south garden beds cleared and waiting for spring. Through the front door. The entry opens to that wide plank pine glowing under warm light. The old cut nail heads still showing like little dark stars in the boards. The front room to your left, tall ceiling, fresh plaster smoothed by hand, and that cherry mantel my grandfather made holding the whole room together. The parlor beyond it, quiet, those 100-year-old joists overhead still doing their job, hidden again, but sound. The kitchen in the back wing, soft green cabinets, soapstone that catches the north light my mother used to garden by. The bath upstairs, simple, white subway tile set in a running bond, a cast iron tub I saved and had reglazed instead of hauling off, and back out front, standing in the driveway where I stood that first rainy day, she's a house again. Straight, dry, warm, she'll outlive me easy, all in about $95,000 in 7 months against the land value they wanted to bury her for. 7 months, 1 rebuilt sill, 40 feet of repointed stone, a whole new nervous system of wire and pipe, and 1 cherry mantle that never should have been painted in the first place, and somebody built this house right the first time. My folks kept her 40 years and let her go, and I don't hold it against them. Life moves. But she waited. Houses like this wait for somebody to see the bones under the ruin. My job was just to not be the guy who ruined it. Next one's already sitting empty 2 towns over. A 1790s cape, older than anything I've touched, with a center chimney the size of a small car and a beam over the hearth somebody hand-hewed with an axe you could still see the marks of. Everyone said that one's too far gone, too. I'll see you there.